So, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Parabellum. Today, we will talk about the use of artificial intelligence for malicious purposes. Let's say, so both hackers and state actors, propaganda, fake news. You've seen how many times images are generated and then spread online, partly by mafias, partly by people trying to use software to create Trojans, to create malicious software to use for blackmail, scams, or ransomware, which basically means you have to pay if you want to unlock it. And it's also very connected to the world of cryptocurrencies. And to talk about this, of course, we have Ivan Barbato with us. So welcome. Welcome back after a quiet period in the Middle East.
It's true. It's true. Thank you very much once again for your invitation. And I'm always very happy to be part of your community. And yes, as we had planned, the idea was to continue on this journey of ours in the world of artificial intelligence. The light is changing, in the sense that we started out on a bright note, all focused on the future, because we had dealt with the past, the present, the future, especially with artificial intelligence. Then already in the last live stream, we entered a world that maybe was starting to get a bit gray. No, this adoption of artificial intelligence by the military system, by the military sector, we talked about Palantir, we talked about Anthropic. By the way, there are also some last-minute updates on these topics. Last week, a judge in San Francisco already handed down an initial victory. We should mention Anthropic, which had sued the Pentagon over the well-known story of Anthropic being included in the supply chain risk, which would have basically prevented Anthropic from working with all the suppliers that deal with the Pentagon. So in this case, we note an initial victory for Anthropic, but it all continues, the reasons why this war was unleashed. In the Middle East, surely analysts and historians will examine them in the days, weeks, months, if not years to come. But surely artificial intelligence has been one of the showcases this war has used to make its mark. From Palantir, last week I was watching some interviews with another rather curious figure, let's say. I don't know if you know Palantir. Palmer Luckey, the founder of Anduril. The guy who had sold the company he founded, Oculus, to Meta, to Facebook, making a lot of money. And he reinvented himself in the military sector also with a great deal of success. Just last week, he presented an upgrade to his Fury drone. I don't know how many of you know him. We've dealt with him.
It's not that what they showed is particularly interesting or innovative, except for the fact that they say what they want to do. Weapon systems with ordinary tools and readily available off-the-shelf technology.
What is really surprising about these young people, we've already talked about this, both mentioning the Big Bang Theory moment and the fact that all these characters were inspired by video games. Palmer, by the way, goes to do interviews in flip-flops, Bermuda shorts, a Hawaiian shirt, and messy hair. He spends more time drinking energy drinks than chatting. And basically, when you hear an investor like this talk, you get the feeling that everything becomes artificial intelligence, that artificial intelligence will solve everything. However, if we look at what happened in Iran, as long as everything is static, you can make significant progress. But when everything becomes kinetic, it's a bit different. Iran's responses definitely weren't anticipated, and the consequences definitely weren't anticipated either. Here he is. By the way, this is a trademark image of the person in question. They have two great qualities of modern entrepreneurs. They're both good with technology and they're excellent from an engineering point of view. I mean, they're able to, but also with social media. Yes, to create personas for themselves, right? Yes, exactly. And like Elon Musk, He has a remarkable industrial engineering ability. For example, if we look at the way Elon Musk managed to recover with OpenAI or with his other companies, it was incredible. In 67 months, he set up gigafactory-style companies, and that's exactly what Andaren did as well. He builds factories, modular industries, and is preparing to become one of the biggest suppliers to the Pentagon. But this, as we were saying, is the detour we were taking. We moved from a completely well-lit area to a somewhat gray area, if you will, where everything is closely linked to propaganda, very often to facts, but not always corroborated. And the idea that Mirko and I had today is to move into that area, which is definitely a shadowy area, maybe even a very dark one. Because just as we saw in the shift from static to kinetic in the Iran war, the actors we place on the dark side of the force don't always react as expected. And often they organize themselves quite successfully in using these technologies. Exactly. Today we're starting the conversation, which will be divided into 4 parts if we want to split it up this way. So we'll mostly observe what the actors from the dark side of the force do and what that represents. Alarms and dangers for countries. Maybe we can narrow it down to NATO countries, including Europe and the United States. So we'll take a journey that starts zoomed out and gradually focuses in on what our present and future problems will be. Let's start just as Mirko is showing. This time I changed my approach a bit, so I chose a graphic style, almost as if they were website pages. So let's start by looking at the use of artificial intelligence in 3 areas, I would say, and in general of modern technologies in what we can define as asymmetric conflicts. All conflicts nowadays are asymmetric conflicts. In February 2022, we started to see the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and more we are witnessing conflicts. When we use the word conflicts, we mean both physical clashes on a military level, but also from the point of view of real development. We have already observed everything that is the world of artificial intelligence, reducing it to the 2 macro worlds, the United States and China. This is the real battle with us as Europeans, as observers and users of these technologies. Exactly. When we look at the topic in the context of asymmetric conflicts, Mirko, if you want to scroll down a bit more so we can also show the rest, from dissemination to integration to use, especially dual use of these technologies in turn. So when we look at the world, little by little, we are moving towards a new world, which perhaps in the last part of our conversation, we will explicitly identify as terrorism, cybercrime, so organized crime through technology, even cyber warfare. And we will give an example. A classic example of organized crime that is increasingly moving towards an almost intelligent organization, almost using all these platforms. Just as we ordinary citizens had understood it, these organizations also are limited to being users or heavy users of these technologies, so we don't find them in research and development, but in utilization. Often it's very imaginative and often a use of the technologies that wasn't foreseen by those who invented them. Earlier backstage, we were talking with Mirko. I mean, Telegram, for example, is a fantastic communication tool, but very often it's used in very imaginative ways, even by criminals. And there are many others like it. As strange as it may seem, these large-scale distribution platforms are mostly used for propaganda, not for communication between organizations, as we will see later on. So what do they actually do? They find something new, just like all of us, and look for ways to use it to their advantage, building real ecosystems. This is currently causing major difficulties, serious difficulties. The authorities it's causing major difficulties for the authorities, because often we're dealing with mechanisms that we can definitely call dual use, meaning they're often commercial mechanisms, so they're very difficult to control. Often these mechanisms, like the platforms we all know, such as WhatsApp, for example, or even Telegram, are so-called end-to-end encrypted platforms, in which the same company, the same organization, the same entity that created the platform can't interfere with the message. In other words, the person who sends a message is the only one, along with the recipient, who can see the message in clear text. So basically, the authorities have a hard time tracking these organizations, which often operate in gray areas. They use well-known platforms, but often also very little-known platforms to exchange messages. How does it work? Let's go a bit deeper. How does the spread of these capabilities work? Exactly. They mainly focus on operational integration. In this initial phase, let's keep things fairly general and at a surface level, and then later we go deeper and deeper. They often use open channels, right? I would say we can divide it into 6 main areas. One of the main areas, in short, used by criminals, let's put them all together, because then the various definitions can range from terrorism to criminal organizations, more or less small, more or less organized, to simple lone wolves. The first one is definitely the cyber world. The cyber world benefits from artificial intelligence in a pretty substantial way. Maybe, Mirko, go a bit lower so that those watching can see as well. Exactly, exactly. The world of cybercrime has benefited enormously from artificial intelligence. Why? Because the simple use of artificial intelligence, combined with the ability to translate, the ability to spread information, so influence and propaganda, has helped a lot. Both in this case, cyber criminals and also terrorist or pseudo-terrorist organizations, so those who support these organizations. Influence and propaganda are perhaps becoming one of the strongest weapons in their favor and the most difficult to counter. I believe that in Italy, just last week, actually yesterday, regarding the issue of influence, we witnessed this series of arrests of minors, one of whom was accused. I believe there are a total of 7 young people who were involved. However, they were part of a group called Werewolf Division. Mirko, you are a historian, a great expert in history. You know that this is not a new group. In short, it was born as a general resistance group already at the end of the Second World War. And what does it do? It tries to spread, it tries to influence, it tries to spread propaganda. Unfortunately, now the benefit given by smartphones and social media platforms is not always positive, and it can't be 100% positive. It also has dramatic consequences, truly dramatic ones. And especially young people, the very young, are definitely the ones most affected, more vulnerable, and more easily influenced. These groups' recruiting is targeting younger and younger people.
ISIS had already started back in 2000, what was it? 2008, 2010, using Facebook to recruit and so on. There were many cases.
There's a case from these past weeks, even though in Iran, I believe there are around 200,000 Pasdaran and 600,000 Basij. The IRGC, the Pasdaran, are recruiting 12-year-old kids complete with uniforms and everything. Obviously, they start with lookout activities, gathering information, and so on. But of course, in those contexts, it's a bit easier. For these organizations, it's easier to indoctrinate them, radicalize them, and so on. So when I mentioned ISIS, it's spot on, but it's something that happens in many places, unfortunately, even in Europe. We might see that in the third part of our conversation. Exactly as we were saying, so recruitment and mobilization, and then they use it a lot to build financial and logistical resilience. They coordinate a lot through the platforms using codes among themselves, and we'll see them in the final phase. Even the platforms themselves, Mirko, it's not that it's artificial intelligence, but everything that comes with it. Home banking and financial platforms are widely used to move money around. And all of this uses a concept. I don't know if you've ever heard of a technology called Tor, which is a browser built around layers.
I would say yes.
Everyone who works in OSINT and related fields knows this technique.
That there is also dark OSINT.
Yes, no. Absolutely, absolutely. Because even those who work on the good side need to protect themselves. So they use an onion-based system. That's exactly what onion means. They shield themselves more and more.
It's the symbol of the Tor browser, by the way. That's exactly it.
So by building a series of proxies, basically satellites, you disguise yourself more and more, to the point where for the authorities, it becomes impossible to figure out which server. Maybe it's someone next door nearby, or it feels like they're writing from Singapore or somewhere else.
There was Silk Road, yes.
Yes.
Because I knew that Silk Road was a forum where you could buy a bag of weed from a hitman or a gun that would arrive disassembled. And then basically the owner got caught. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the FBI has had him in prison for a few years, but other versions have sprung up since then. There's also an Italian version that, if I'm not mistaken, was called Forum Cipolla, then subversions keep popping up and so on.
It's all absolutely true. Also, if you're up for it and your community is interested, maybe next time we can take a look at state actors. Just to make a quick note, the cyber world is divided into two main categories. Those who work in the hacker world are divided. When you work for a conventional company, the teams are divided into red teams and blue teams. Blue teams are the defenders. Red teams run attack simulations to test the system. Then the broader hacker world is divided into white hats, gray hats, and black hats. The white hats are the ethical ones, and the black hats are the bad guys. And gray hats are the ones who sometimes operate on the edge. Then really heavy.
The ideological ones, right? The ones who maybe, I don't know, are the Russian sandworms who maybe wouldn't do anything against another Russian, but they do it against the Ukrainians. There are those who hack Indian call centers and basically expose them on YouTube. That's pretty famous, right? I mean, is that ethical? Yes, because he's not taking money, but technically he's committing another crime in another country against someone who's committing a crime in another country. And then there's also the fact that the word hacker is often used incorrectly.
Absolutely, that's what I mean.
Hacked game. No, those are crackers, the ones who break the cracks. Then there are the lamers, which was also used as an insult, like you're a lamer. A lamer is someone who pretends to be a hacker but isn't.
Yes.
In fact, those who use derivative programs, I'm talking about really old stuff from the 90s, like Back Orifice, things like that.
So we absolutely have to do this episode because Mirko has brought up something really interesting. Because in general, those who work in the cyber world, not calling them hackers, fall into different groups, including state actors. So states that wage war against each other, cyber warfare among themselves. Then there are ideological actors like Anonymous. He often tried to help people, and then there are criminals. In the world of state and criminal hackers, a real franchise has been created. So we'll show this in the future. What do these people do? They write real manuals. They even provide training, and they explain how to do things. Why is that? First of all, the attack surface is immense. It's the web. So not everyone can do it at the same time. when they do franchising, they explain to the kids or to the Indian or the Vietnamese or the Cambodian how to carry out these attacks. And they take a percentage that ranges from 15 to 20% of the profits. But what do they do with this? They prevent others from attacking that target or another one.
It's called risk transfer.
Exactly. So when the kid who's just starting out does something wrong, then when the police come knocking at the door, it's the kid who faces the consequences, not the group. So then we'll also show how they do it, how they talk, the kind of chat that takes place.
That's an interesting question. How common is cyber warfare? There's never been any talk of any kind of attack. They are invisible wars. These are the cases that come out when they hit a hospital, when they hit a grid, and the government doesn't let people know. But at any moment there are wars, even ones fought for absurd reasons. Gamers who get mad at the developer and launch a DDoS attack on the game's servers until they reverse the patch or unban their account or things like that. There are a lot of wars that happen without being reported. Yes, often states wage them on a military level. It's not like the FBI comes to you and says, look, yesterday we got hacked. It's an internal matter. And then they find out. Aside from Kashpata, who the other day got hacked by the Iranians, not his personal email, so the password was probably 12345, considering the kind of people we're talking about. In 90% of cases, the password comes from your date of birth. A little trick you can use if you want to find out someone's Facebook password. You ask them for their mother's maiden name, their date of birth, and the name of their favorite pet. These are 3 out of 5 of the recovery questions.
Absolutely, yes. But the question your user asked is really good. It deserves an answer. Then little by little during this conversation, I'll mention some of the 45 cases to you, some older ones, so as not to refer to current issues. But as Mirko said, the reasons are not always made public. It's not in their interest. I'll just tell you one thing. Last summer, Spain and Portugal had a blackout. Portugal recovered after a few hours, 10 or 11 hours. Spain took a bit longer. There are many official reasons. If I were curious, I would go and see what the Stuxnet virus was. The one that made the centrifuges in Iran blow up a few years ago. Obviously, the authorities can't disclose this kind of thing. But for example, there's an official report released by Anthropic, which had been attacked in a very coordinated way, with an attack that was 90% automated, moreover, using Anthropic's own technologies. And the attack was carried out by GTG 1002, which is an official Chinese group. They are Chinese military personnel. Or, for example, Mirko just mentioned Patel. Andala has carried out many attacks lately. They are Iranians. Andala is an Iranian group. This gives us the opportunity to continue talking about the gray zone. Because very often, as Mirko mentioned earlier, I want to get back at the developer and so on. That world also works a lot based on reputation. So if I manage to scare a lot, when I really attack someone who doesn't know how to defend themselves, I can really scare them a lot. So Andala carries out significant attacks. They're not always that strong and successful as they say. Probably the case of Patel, for example, is a case of hacking the phone of someone who took pictures of him. It's not Patel's phone. FBI phones can't be hacked that easily. But Andala, for example, carried out a really strong attack on Stryker a few weeks ago. Stryker is a supplier of medical devices. In America, it was really strong. It shut it down. It shut it down and caused a lot of damage. It destroyed a lot of things. So these groups are strong, they have support, and they keep getting stronger also because, let me make an important aside here. Unlike frontier artificial intelligence, which involves very intelligent people, big laboratories, and large investments, this is a world where, since talent is fairly evenly distributed around the world, a group of 45 people with technologies that are obsolete for artificial intelligence, but they manage to exploit system vulnerabilities, manages to be operational and strong all over the world. This news actually came out today, I think, so I can mention it. In Libya, too, they're getting organized. Mastery is assembling troops to build cyber warfare capabilities. North Korea is sticking to this topic. North Korea makes around $1,000 million a year from ransomware, ransoms, and blackmail. Quindi, insomma, later, as we move forward, I'll talk about a topic related to Lazarus, which is the North Korean group. Exactly. Mirko, let's go to the matrix. From 1 to 5, with 5 obviously being the highest weight, the greatest danger, I've divided the technologies and functions for you along with the area where they are located. So, for example, in the field of AI-assisted systems, criminals, terrorist, or pseudo-terrorist organizations are now able to carry out propaganda and recruitment much more easily than before. Propaganda is an important topic. It's still there. Because, for example, especially in the world of counterterrorism, it's very difficult for authorities to link behaviors to charges backed by evidence. Because propaganda is something that moves in a rather non-linear way. Okay, so for example, they are able to produce videos much more easily in various languages, and above all, things are starting to get sophisticated. The mistake is intentional. Do you remember Mirko, the man in black, right? After Roswell, the CIA would send people to the homes of those who claim to have seen men dressed like John Belushi, you know, like the Blues Brothers. As theatrical as possible, with cars just like in the movie Men in Black. Why? Because that way, when people told the story, these are movies from the 50s, the first influence operations, when people talked about what happened, they were considered crazy. People dressed in black with Ray-Bans came to my house. Come on, what are you talking about? And the people behind this propaganda do the same thing. I mean, they deliberately insert things, mistakes on purpose. Why? Because when it's too perfect, it makes people too curious. For example, in the civil or commercial field, right? Until some time ago, a fully AI-generated avatar had been created, a beautiful girl named Alana, Hispanic, an influencer who had reached millions of followers.
Well, also in GigaChat.
Yes, absolutely, yes. When the followers, the one with
the typical beefcake you see, he was supposed to be a Turkish model. I don't remember what. Actually, it was made up. It was a mesh of several exaggerated models and so on. Yes, their actions.
Just last week, I don't remember the name, but there was an account with a beautiful girl who was an American soldier. She posted pictures with Trump, with Melania in all situations, obviously very patriotic, beautiful, the American dream. But in the end, it was a complete avatar. But when that happens, users get pissed off and stop looking at it. Instead, when it has flaws, everything is intentional because they want to normalize it. Do you remember the video about the attack on the Pentagon with Tom Cruise? Exactly. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica Foster. The video made by the Pentagon right after the attack in Iran, Tom Cruise style and so on. What's the goal? It's to normalize, to make everything seem like a game, so everyone distances themselves, dehumanizing everything. So now when you see a drone attack, you focus on the success of the attack, okay? You focus on the drone attack rather than the consequences, okay? Then, so what do large language models do? They help once again. Propaganda, recruitment, cyber operations have now become very powerful with scams, with language switching, with phishing, increasingly sophisticated, increasingly difficult.
There's no longer the Nigerian prince from the past who used to send you emails written really badly. Now they're much better. I'm telling you this from my experience as a YouTuber. I get a lot of emails from people pretending to be YouTube, Facebook, people telling me, there's a copyright issue with your videos, man. Click on this link and things like that. I get tons of these. Or there are fake business proposals where you get an email, we're sponsor X, we sell microphones, we'll send it to you, and so on. Download the introductory package. You go, obviously you do the online registration and of course a trollgram.
Absolutely. These are called one click, but we've reached the point where there are 0 clicks. Today, we're in the mood for revelations. Many of you have probably heard about it. For example, a few years ago, there was a software called Pegasus, an Israeli software. Jeff Bezos's phone was infected by a photo sent by Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the King of Saudi Arabia. We'll show that in the episode. How do you do it? We'll show it in episode 6.
This reminds me that it's going around on WhatsApp now, right? Yes. It makes me laugh because when I get a message, it happened with Professor Breccia, greetings to him. I get an image like, please vote for my daughter.
Bravissimo. It goes around a lot. The Pegasus one was more sneaky, more complicated because that one is 0 click. You can't do anything about it, even if you don't click or open it. Now we'll show it when we do the episode, how it's done. Let's look at some cases. We're still talking about the global scene. Let's look at some cases now, cases from the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa, further down in this slide that you're showing. So the Middle East was already mentioned by Mirko, ISIS, Hezbollah. By the way, in the world of propaganda, well, this point needs to be made. Mirko, do you want to show the photo where Hamad Bachar and Zahir Birawi are? That photo from that stage. Here it comes. All right, in the meantime, I'll go ahead and explain it. Propaganda often uses people who are unaware as well. So, for example, in these scams we were describing earlier, there it is, Mirko is enlarging it. The man with the little sheet in the center wearing a gray jacket is Ahmad Bara. And instead, near the red flag, there's Zahir Brahimi. That one is the foreign minister of Hamas. In England, the two of them.
Jean Reno after rehabilitation.
I due. We know them very well in Europe, even without realizing it. The two owned several of the boats in the flotilla. Those who went to distribute food supplies and then were arrested by Israel and so on, they very often use unsuspecting people. I'm absolutely sure that on the flotilla, among the hundreds, I don't know how many there were, of volunteer members and so on, there were many who were driven by their ideology and wanted to go help. See, these organizations often take advantage of good faith. They hide behind the fight for our rights, the fight for oppressed peoples, and so on. And very often they are running campaigns to find funds, to finance, and to support activities that range from organized crime to terrorism. Going back to our topic, this was just a side note, going back to our example. For example, there's the case of South Asia, where especially in Cambodia, something is happening at the border between China and Cambodia. Chinese organized crime has built real scam centers. They took over many casino licenses meant for supposedly legitimate operations, but inside they keep slaves. They work to scam people, so to commit fraud. So for now...
Because when you get there, basically, they take your passport, so you're stuck there. The Saudis did it too, you know? When they hosted the World Cup and so on, this later came to light during the labor scandals. Besides the conditions, they took away their passports and so on. They couldn't go back until they finished the job. So it was a known technique. It used to happen in India before and in Pakistan too. Now I have moved, yes.
From this point of view, for now, we're still a bit lucky because there's a language barrier issue. So they mainly scam fellow Vietnamese, Chinese, and so on in the United States. In Europe, they're the ones Mirko was describing, like the one-click scams, the dancer daughter voting, and so on. They take all the information. In Africa, it might not even be worth starting the discussion because the African system is so weak. Because of professional reasons, I have spent a lot of time in sub-Saharan Africa, various countries. There's an episode that I remember, for example, in Mozambique about 10 years ago. I'll be quick because I see that 40 minutes have already passed and we have many things to discuss. About 10 years ago there, since everyone was distrustful of the authorities, what really mattered were the WhatsApp groups. And WhatsApp groups were always used to spread fake news, propaganda, and so on. A striking case, in fact, used by criminals called the Iron case, the Iron Gang case. Just imagine that. It all happened in a week, but it was almost turning into a coup d'etat. Why? Because rumors spread that there had been one. The capital of Mozambique is Maputo, which used to be called Lourenço Marques. It's strategically located about an hour away by air from Johannesburg. It's located on a bay. One part is Maputo, the capital, and the other is a satellite city called Matova. There were rumors that a criminal gang had started breaking into houses using an iron to torture people in those homes and steal their money. There was panic, absolute panic. So everyone was looking at everyone with suspicion until the real criminals started to realize that this really scared people. So they would go around with irons in the trunk of the car. So we would open the trunk, show this iron, and everyone would get scared. In Mozambique, since the authorities don't work, people organize themselves and carry out lynchings. So there were people who died because they were mistaken, people who might have just been minding their own business because they were mistaken. All of this was based on a fake news story that was taking on the proportions of a coup d'etat in just 1 week, just to show you how easy it is in
Africa. There was another one, the one where they declared that the president had died and had been replaced. That one too. Then they didn't believe that the one who came back was the original one.
Yes.
We saw this thing in Italy too, before artificial intelligence, the period of the Uno Bianca. The Uno Bianca gang, everyone thought they were seeing them everywhere. Imagine how many white Unos were driving around Italy. Everyone saw the Uno Bianca bandits. Maybe just because someone left one parked in an alley, they thought that's them.
And let's go back to the concept.
And that's the paradox, right? I mean, Ivan, what you were saying, why did the Uno Bianca gang use a white Uno? Because there are so many of them.
Exactly.
And it gave a lot of false reports.
And so we're slowly getting to the point we mentioned earlier. Either the error is deliberate or there's constant distrust. Currently, for example, those who create fake news don't do it anymore. For example, another scam that's popular now is that we can change faces in real time with artificial intelligence and even imitate voices, but it's not perfect. So if I try to be perfect, I get caught right away. At the moment, because many companies have now eliminated meetings via Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, and so on, because there were cases where someone managed to sneak in pretending to be the CEO with a poor connection so that the flaws of artificial intelligence wouldn't be noticed. There was an actor, a criminal behind it, pretending to be the CEO. And without a clear image, it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. In short,
these are the real ones. I connected in the car, I left the airport, it's nighttime.
So very good. Let's move on. Now we'll consider this one finished and move on to the next one, the one about organized crime, the use of artificial intelligence by terrorist groups. Here I've divided it into 3 main areas for you. If we want, then we can go to the third part where we'll mention the presence, in fact, of what could be in the United States. We'll look at it more closely later. They don't have major fears, at least for now, of Islamist terrorism. They are more focused on domestic terrorism. We in Europe are probably more exposed to a potential threat, knock on wood, on anything you can find, to a potential threat associated with Islamic terrorism, with growing concerns about radical groups and organized crime. So in the second part, we are moving towards dividing into three branches. So the Muslim Brotherhood, which certainly represents a potential threat, but for which we still don't have much evidence, because then Mirko will show it. As mentioned before, they often operate under ethical and legal fronts based on volunteering, based on the fight for rights, all things that have a strong appeal in Europe. Artificial intelligence, yes, we'll show this in a moment. Artificial intelligence, where is it helping these groups? Questi gruppi. Exactly, as mentioned in propaganda, in dissemination logistics. The goal of today's talk is to move toward a final point where we discuss how they communicate, okay? So maybe not everyone has noticed this, but they often communicate through symbols and do so to stay hidden. So dangerous, serious, and organized groups don't always operate on mass distribution platforms because they would start to be tracked. So they don't express themselves and don't speak in code on these platforms because it would be easy to find them. They often create forums that, using the onion concept, as soon as they are found by the authorities, they are blocked and the groups quickly move to other forums. Let's go to the matrix, come on, so we can speed things up a bit. Yes, let's talk about the sectors where it operates. These are all data that I have provided for you. Then, Mirko, if you want, share these two presentations with the community. They all come with sources and references, and they are all state agencies ranging from the FBI, NSA, CIA in Europe, Europol, Interpol, and so on. They are focusing a lot on spreading the content. Often in some other forums, when we talk, for example, about the Middle East, there is a general consensus. For example, in the case of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas has won the propaganda war by a lot. There is no competition. Israel doesn't even try to counter the propaganda anymore. Let's say because it's so overwhelming, it's so much stronger that by now it's a lost battle for them. Is this because, especially in Europe, it has taken hold? Because Europeans are very inclined to fight for rights, defend the weak, and oppose abuses committed by the powerful, by whoever happens to be the bully. So you stop observing and studying, and you put on the jersey of the soccer team you care about the most. So from that moment on, you no longer listen to the other side, the other perspective, but you take a biased stance. So in this regard, artificial intelligence has greatly helped propaganda. And then people are competing because, after all, I believe Iran is the 4th country in the world for producing STEM graduates. They are engineers, graduates in disciplines like engineering, technology, mechanics, maintenance, and so on. In short, highly skilled people. The same goes for the Arabs. The Palestinians are strong in this area. Hamas has some pretty strong cyber structures, basically educated and trained by Iranians and Russians. Thank you. Let's go to the matrix, Mirko, if you don't mind. So let's look at the actor, the function, the one at the bottom. maybe even further down. Here it is. As before, I broke it down on a scale from 1 to 5 by importance or weight based on the function that artificial intelligence performs and what it helps with. So terrorism and SMS are very helpful in recruitment and propaganda. We mentioned this earlier in relation to the miner who was arrested yesterday. I believe that the group he belonged to in Italy had about 80 members who received information and training. So here the language barrier no longer exists. It's possible to widely distribute informational material. In short, the young man was in possession of materials to make acetone peroxide mixture, in other words, explosive materials. The same material in bulk, the same groups, in this case left-wing radicals, often distribute manuals that provide training for fighting against the authorities and so on. So artificial intelligence is really helping propaganda and training. Organized crime focuses a lot on where the money is, obviously. So there are no more ideals. It's all about the money. So on frauds, on money laundering, on the cryptocurrency side. Now, the state actors, the ones we mentioned earlier, the various countries, especially in Asia, focus a lot on stealing credentials to access cryptocurrency wallets. When we do the episode on cybersecurity, we'll also talk a lot about smartphones. They are perhaps the weakest link in the whole chain. We store way too much information in these devices, and all of them can be attacked, from iPhones to Android devices. Android. The state actors we were just mentioning are more oriented towards hybrid influence. That's what we were talking about earlier. They often operate in areas that are deliberately confusing so that it's hard to understand who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. Very often, the attacks by these groups are attacks that, since they can afford it, last for months. From the moment you've been attacked to the moment you realize it, often 6 months or even a year can go by. So beyond bypassing all the firewalls, all the systems and so on, once they're inside, they try to understand how the organization works in such a way that they can blackmail you twice. First, for the ransomware, so you have to pay to get back the files you need for your operations. So they encrypt them and you can't decrypt them anymore. Only by paying will they give them back to you. And then there's a second wave when they ask you for money not to spread your information. So they're doing this a lot, especially the very organized groups. I'd say we can wrap up this part as well and move on to the topic of the 3 branches we were talking about. The topic is brotherhood, the monochromafia, and the cyber criminals. In this regard, once again, I have provided you with all verifiable and above all reliable sources. Among the 3 areas, the most difficult one to substantiate is the Muslim Brotherhood. Because as I said, first of all, the authorities, Mirko, while I'm talking, show these 2 official files from the French and American intelligence services. No, the other one, that one, the detour, the other one. Here it is. This is Frère Musulman, the politics of the Muslim Brotherhood. This isn't a brand new document. It's from 2024, from the French intelligence services. The Muslim Brotherhood is officially present in 28 countries in Europe, with a strong presence in Belgium and France. In France, they have, we're not showing them today, but they also have local deputies, often elected, who belong to official parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the same in Belgium. The Muslim Brotherhood operates solely and exclusively in an official manner. So through these non-governmental organizations, fundraising, propaganda, and fighting for rights, So it operates in completely legal areas. The one from the French intelligence services is a document that records, excuse the wordplay, the manuals that they then distribute privately in private venues, from mosques to organizations, from the clubs they have, and so on, with some insights not exactly straightforward. The Muslim Brotherhood is very strong in France for obvious reasons. Especially in the Algerian communities, a bit less in the rest of the so-called Black African communities. They are quite strong, especially among people from the Maghreb. The Egyptians, of course, even managed to take power in Egypt before there was a counter-coup. The Muslim Brotherhood is very strong in Turkey. Hamas is associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas, and they are Islamic organizations of Sunni origin. So this is also one of the reasons, not the Muslim Brotherhood, but the Sunni origin is also partly the reason for the clashes between the Gulf monarchies and Iran, Shiite. Okay. In this case, in the case of the Muslim Brotherhood, the use of artificial intelligence is associated primarily with propaganda and the dissemination of material, propaganda, training, and recruiting. And probably the day when the official agencies tell us they are probably also connected, it has been a bit higher. So by moving some money around the world so as to avoid creating a traceable trail. The second organization, which reminds us that it's not a mistake, Mafia with 2 Fs. The name was given by a Dutch journalist who was later killed by the Mafia. The Mafia is a mafia that quickly gained almost total power, even threatening the political establishment, first in the Netherlands and then in Belgium. In the Netherlands, they even went so far as to publicly threaten Prime Minister Rutte, the one who calls Trump daddy, who is now the Secretary of NATO. They also carried out a series of public executions of influential Dutch citizens who opposed them. It's a mafia that has roots in Morocco. They took great advantage of this widespread system of coffee shops in the Netherlands and quickly moved forward also with help. Roots in Morocco. It's a mafia with roots in Morocco. Development platforms and so on. They quickly took control of the port of Rotterdam and therefore the importation of synthetic drugs, as well as opiates, cocaine, among others, through the port of Rotterdam. And they moved with enormous ease into Belgium, where they took total control of the port of Antwerp. The port of Antwerp, among other things, was a bit easier for them to conquer because it's a huge area. If I'm not mistaken, it's 135 square kilometers, a port that's absolutely uncontrollable by the authorities. Uncontrollable. In the meantime, the authorities are organizing themselves with considerable success. Organizing. They're trying to understand how they operate, but this mafia, compared to the ones we know here, the local ones, has a different characteristic. Ours has an economic or financial basis. Crime aims to generate money. It's absolutely territorial. The macro mafia, on the other hand, is a mafia that involves a lot of people operating in the gray area. So arms dealers, drug traffickers, and so on. There's also potentially a bit of ideology mixed in, because these are people who come from countries where religious influence is quite strong. They also managed to recruit a lot based on the lack of inclusion and integration of young people in these countries. So these are young people who are easier to radicalize. At the moment, it is presenting itself as a mafia with the size and strength of our own local ones. So it's quite worrying from a certain point of view. criminal point of view, spilling over into terrorism. Cyber criminals are the last ones we'll talk about in this session of our chat, also because I forgot an episode that might be interesting to mention. You asked me earlier about state actors. I'll mention one, Lazarus, their North Korean military. Lazarus in 2000, about 10 years ago, right? They stole $1 billion from the Bank of Bangladesh in a single weekend. They managed to recover almost all of it, except for about $80 million. Why is that? Because these state actors often, as mentioned before, operate in gray areas. So this money, at the time, the concept of crypto wallets didn't exist yet. It was real money, so it had to be laundered. So all the money went to the casinos in Macau. They were betting exorbitant amounts in just a few minutes, which obviously attracted attention. Losing wasn't a problem for them. The important thing was to launder that money. So thanks to this incident, alarm bells went off, but the Bank of Bangladesh hadn't noticed it. On Sunday, the casinos in Macau raised the alarm. In the meantime, the money was recovered except for about $80 million. State actors are very interested in money laundering. So they operate on platforms where it's easy to launder money. Betting, buying furniture, luxury goods, and so on. When there's a lot of money, it starts to become harder to launder it. Mirko, let's go. We're heading towards the conclusion.
But I wanted to show it. I always show them because then someone can pause the screen and look at it exactly on their own.
I'll take a sip. You can publish the first two perfectly, but also these because they're mentioned in all the sources. So what we definitely don't want to is copycat behavior. So maybe later we'll review things if we want to give someone some recipes. We're heading towards the last one, and then finally we'll show those two documents from American intelligence. We forgot to mention that one, the tour. I'll explain it to you quickly in 2 seconds. We can also consider that one official open source. The Americans are currently afraid of this one. The title is emblematic. It makes me want to laugh, but there's not much to laugh about because terrorists don't attack bridges and tunnels. According to this official report, I repeat, it's simply because they are very monitored, very closely watched. It would be difficult to organize, it would take too much time, and it would require a high expense, a significant investment to prepare everything. Americans are more concerned about domestic terrorism, okay? While we Europeans will probably become more concerned about two types of warning signs. Terrorism not necessarily associated with the kind of terrorism seen in the early 2000s, but actions aimed at destabilizing. So probably more critical infrastructure, more, as we said before, associated with energy, utilities, and so on. We're coming to the end of our conversation with the last file I gave you. Now, Mirko, in a moment, will start to show how these characters communicate. The one with hashtags, emojis, and so on. So here actually, no, it's not this one. We'll show this one last, not this one either, the other one. Here it is. Here it is. How do they communicate? Here, there's a lot of imagination, many codes, and above all, and this is the point where the authorities have the most difficulty, because they deliberately use symbols and codes that are completely legitimate. They are symbols that mean one thing in a certain country and something else in another. And when seen individually, they are misleading. So you have to look at the patterns, at what is used regularly, the context, and so on. Let's just briefly explain the first ones, those very symbols you see there. The first is the frog, Kermit the Frog, Pepe the Frog. This is widely used, especially in the United States, by extremist groups. They often identify themselves, as we mentioned earlier regarding the Beowulf division. They deliberately identify themselves as the losers, that is, those who are ostracized by everyone. I'm the only one who understands things and everyone is against me. I'm the victim.
So the Muppet is weirder.
The biggest loser. So I declare myself a loser because
these guys haven't seen Revenge of the Nerds 1 and 2.
It's true. And then again, there's imitation. So often teenagers use them without knowing what they're doing, or the wannabe type. I want to show that I am, but I don't know it. This sets off a series of alarm bells as well in these groups. So they spot those who could potentially be recruited.
Since Winter reminds us, all they have to do is go to the Incel forum, and there they'll find plenty of human material.
Absolutely. That happens a lot on Twitter X too. They often code in such a way as to use the platforms like TAM. That is, when the influencer sees a series of symbols, he retweets. So they create a mechanism of constant retweeting so that this information, even if it's fake, admittedly fake, spreads widely.
I'll make a reference that's something only we YouTubers and maybe some people in the audience will understand. A piece of advice for Jubo Drillo, the Ugly People's Forum, and Rato di Fogna. Careful, because those people seem pretty much like the target audience for this kind of thing.
Yes. The same goes for these extremist groups too, the 100%. By the way, this is creating a form of communication that is cross-cutting, because they often use in photos and videos even hand signs. I don't know how many of you know this symbol. This is a supremacist symbol that looks like a simple okay. No?
It's the one used by the Grey Wolves.
No.
No, they do it like this too, right?
That one is like this. The Grey Wolves do it like this. This one is white power, because WP power. Even Erdogan is speaking through symbols. If you have time to spare, if you want to invest in exploring this part, even Erdogan often does this. What is this? One nation, one people, one flag, one religion.
Someone used to say that too, but there were three.
Exactly.
He used to bring the children.
Not only that, yes, the symbol 3, the tigers of Elkan, and so on. Now, Erdogan often uses this symbol to send information and messages. So, among the Muslim Brotherhood and among nationalists, especially Islamic ones, this symbol is widely used.
And what about the other symbols? The 100, the clown, the pretty good pill?
Yes, the clown, the coffee is basically even there, let's say, a gray area. Coffee basically means I don't care when you use it in a certain cluster. It's not my business.
Not my cup of coffee or tea, exactly.
Yes, I don't get involved. It's a matter I don't get involved in. Okay. Let's do this. Close this file and open that one. No.
It doesn't matter.
No, I'll show you more. It's exactly this. I'll show you more because the Americans have also released a guidebook for parents to understand, basically, yes.
I'll scroll through them for now so you can check them later if you want.
Then later open the other one, the one-page one, the one from American Intelligence. That one really, we'll publish that one since it's not ours anyway.
But look, I'm telling you this as a former motorcyclist. 100
points.
It can also be understood as 100% and so on. Motorcyclists use the opposite symbol, 1%er. That is, we are part of the 1%, the others are the other 99%.
Mirko, everyone, for example, there was one that I had to stop using some time ago. I often sent a little heart that would then expand. Well, that's one of the ugliest symbols in the world. It's used a lot, I didn't know, in human trafficking. Yes, especially by those who like children. Absolutely not me. Again, there you go. It's interesting.
The symbol of hidden truth awakening at the start is the pill. It's a reference to the Matrix. Red pill, blue pill.
Very good, very good, very good. Now let's look at it in the American file. Because of a series of jobs I've done in the past, I had to look into this way of speaking, especially among far-right groups. The MAGA people and so on. Not this one, not this one either. Go up, there it is. Yes, this one, the one you picked up earlier. Good job. Scroll through it and then go more towards the images. Let's take a look at it. Exactly, look, that's the little heart I was talking about, see? The fourth one.
But the heart that grows.
Exactly, so the flower.
It's a minor and it's growing. Madonna? This is like the language for perverts.
I'm asking you this. Scroll in such a way, and when prized.
Victim is a virgin, they use sherry because in America they say pop her cherry.
That's right. Scroll through when you see these graphic images and explain to the listeners the symbol on the side so we can show it completely. Here, this is already more of the way gangs talk, okay? So they send messages with these codes. In the case of terrorists, much less so because they're less interested in showing off.
But look at this. Gas pump, blood type NG to spell out gang. There are some creative people, huh?
Absolutely, yes. We'll probably see this in Italy and Europe in a little while because it's mostly used in America. So they're the first to adopt this thing.
I don't remember on which YouTube channel, someone talking about the language used in the world of escort websites. No? Yes. And he said that they use driving school language to negotiate the price. A city speed limit, which means 50 euros, right?
Exactly.
They use this as an example.
Exactly. Absolutely, yes. Scroll down, there are other very interesting tables about drug codes. Then we'll get to the part about terrorists. Here, what I found then, imagination, the goat. Greatest of all time. That one is used too.
Yes, a lot for Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and so on.
Exactly. But when synthetic drugs started spreading and arriving, they became associated with a certain drug symbol. And then there's the goat, the recipe that turned out best.
Look, there's even the unit of measurement, a pound. Yes. It's a small backpack. 8 ball.
Exactly. The various pills, the different symbols that we'll see later identify everything from methamphetamine to fentanyl to cocaine, of course, the snowman. Here, there are even, if you look a little further up, that was a recipe to make it. Okay, the one from the recipe book.
Yes.
Yes, then further down, then we'll see this file when you publish it. There are also other things like the inverted triangle for anti-Semitic extremist groups and so on. But there are some that really require it. Here they are. Giuramio, thank you. Exactly. that change symbols. Yes, these are.
But look at this. This is the barber one, right? The spinning barber pole. Well, now I'm telling everyone, go back in your WhatsApp chats or maybe with your girlfriend, size, and look at the little icons you use.
Ecco questo, sì.
Let's be careful with these.
Let's be careful with these. What Mirko is showing is a sort of handbook for the part more connected to Islam, okay? So there are all sorts of instructions. Thank you. Here, this is important. Transportation is important. Size.
That one there attacked himself, it seems fair to me.
The box, that is the first one, or another symbol like the 4 I showed you, the Tawit. There is only one truth, us.
Size, yes.
Yes. Size, for example, the last yes.
These symbols. Wasn't there also the famous gun? Because at some point there was a mess about it on X or on Facebook. I don't remember why they changed the gun, and there was the guy with the mask who said, I'll put it back on Switch. On the websites, everyone was focused on the fact that it was a gun. Puritans, you can't even use the gun icon. Maybe it was exactly because it was used in those contexts.
Here again, it always needs to be considered. Mirko, you perfectly understood the context. For example, there's also the little symbol for lady or gentleman. We use that one a lot. The one used in a far-right environment has a different meaning. You, for example, just now, as soon as you showed it above, there was Pepe the Frog, which explained it, but go up a bit more, a little higher, just a bit more. A bit more, there you go, the third box. The second symbol, that's the symbol of the Muslim Brotherhood, the 2 crossed swords. Okay, so if we start mixing them, please don't do it.
Don't do this at home. Here it's being done by professionals.
Exactly, so everything needs to be looked at carefully. I realize that when this kind of study is done by parents, it can also cause alarm. As always, it's useful to communicate, chat, and have a dialogue to understand what's happening. This is the last one after which our chat ends. This is fresh from March 16th, please. It's very long. We'll put it up, then you can read it yourselves. But there are 2 things that deeply worry Americans, only 2. The first is space warfare. Space war. Okay, they are very worried. Why? Because everything that happens in space, so with satellites, even Russia itself is trying to build its own kind of Starlink network. The Chinese, of course, have much more capability, and the Americans absolutely do not want to lose either the war for space or. But above all, they want to protect themselves. And this, as far as the second warning sign for the Americans is concerned, is precisely linked to hybrid attacks. Today, there was an article in the Corriere. In fact, I shared it with a close friend. I think Alexander Greenberg is watching us, by the way, and he'll later appear on Mirko Alexander's channel. I believe that in the Middle East, he is the person who knows the Iranian system best, a wonderful person. He probably speaks 10 languages. I feel embarrassed when I talk to him. He had written an article. Very interesting. Today I found a version of it, a version that I don't think was inspired by his article in Corriere, which is about the Mosaic organization of Iran. For the curious, or for those who hadn't fully realized it, this explains a series of actions Iran had taken, like attacks on Turkey, attacks on Oman, and so on. It's nice, and it was given to me by Khamenei. It was after June of last year. Let's organize ourselves as a mosaic. There's no longer a pyramid, so there are no leaders who, once eliminated, then interrupt the flow, but the division was made like a mosaic. So there are many cells that operate independently with a doctrine, but with their own decisions.
But with the idea of taking them down by eliminating the leader, it's completely distorted because it's more of a horizontal administration, where if one piece falls, no one steps into another.
Exactly. They were also used to it. There was a macabre joke circulating in Iran that when it was time to appoint the chief of staff, you had to ask Mossad. They would make the joke among themselves. So, in short, the infiltration of intelligence systems and services is very pronounced. The Mosaic division, which among other things was a doctrine that had also been spread to mass. That's basically how it worked. This allows them, in moments when they can't communicate through conventional channels, to operate, to continue operating in a semi-autonomous way. This is one of the issues that worries the United States the most, and it also worries us Europeans, because lone wolves are very difficult to deal with. Authorities are committed and working hard, as we saw earlier. The ecosystem in which they operate is very complex. It changes every day. It's a mix that's difficult to study, and often while they're studying it, the authorities have already been overtaken by other types of organizations. I would say that at 23, 24, we almost have this range.
Because then there will be the match. Is anyone interested in watching 11 overpaid guys chasing a ball? Not really, but I tried not to, let's say, have things overlap. You will find the sources in the description. I put the link with all the sources so you can download and analyze them. Don't overdo it with the emojis. Today, otherwise, I'll end up on any random list. So, in my opinion, we'll catch up and see each other on Friday for a live stream about Iran, and Moro will definitely be there. I'm definitely hearing from the leaders of others.
You're recruiting them, so with artificial intelligence.
Soon? No, I'm sampling them. Soon I'll have my own digital leader, my own digital Moro. I let them talk for 12 hours straight like a marathon on their own, right?
Exactly. Very good, Mirko. What can I say? Once again, thank you for the invitation, and thanks to all your listeners who had the patience to listen to us. And I hope they deepen their knowledge, not about artificial intelligence, but about how to defend themselves from all this, from this world that is coming, thanks to... Grazie ancora.
Good night, and good night to those who will watch us at midnight. Before this, I wanted to say one last thing, since there is a representative from OZ Intelligence here. We are moving forward. We are testing the client, the one you can use for distributed computing to help us. I really appreciate the comments from everyone who wrote below. And I'll leave the computer on for you, and I'll give you a hand with this client idea, like SETI, to help you classify the sources and so on. And also to all the emails we've received and that I forwarded to the team. They will be evaluated based on skills for those who want to help with what we're about to launch, which goes beyond the app, which classifies and so on. In any case, working with the community, whether it's fact-checking, debugging, or contributing, just hardware running this software, which doesn't use many resources anyway, 10%, 15% at most when you're not doing anything. Because doing this kind of classification still requires huge funds. Instead, by distributing it like this, you could achieve a lot with everyone's support. Yes, I like what data miners do, like Hashminer, which used your graphics card while you were sleeping and paid you in Bitcoin, a share of the Bitcoin mined with other users. This is more or less the same thing, but it's for the purpose of fact-checking, improving the classification of sources, which already number 12,500, so in the end you get much more reliable information. a bias and continuous, because then we pick them from hundreds of countries, not just the Italian or English ones and so on. So they give you an increasingly interesting picture, because maybe there's a guy in Bangladesh, I don't know, who's a correspondent in Ukraine, who sees something that we don't see much. Because when you look at it, most of the news that even our own newspapers publish are almost all repeats from Associated Press, Reuters, Bloomberg, and so on. So they're very similar. To find fairly good news, you have to look more at the sources from individual military personnel, bloggers, or things like that. So thank you all and see you soon.
Thank you all.